Excerpt from the Third Journal of Henry Abernathy, Special Agent of the Assembly Research Division, Protection Detail, Western Kairul, Spring 3/27/1951. Although the doctors are here on the mainland outpost studying a concentration of magic they found, magic is not the only danger out here. On the fourth night, we heard a woman's pained and panicked scream out behind the tree line. All inside were quickly accounted for, so I figured it must have been one of the locals, since the rest of our team was back on the island and we could still spot the ship. Whatever was out there kept screaming. She used a few words, but Kagaman didn't speak the local dialect, so we were left to our speculations. The next night, she came back. Her screams were horrid as ever, now accompanied by a sickening crunch like she was being butchered. After a little while, she left, but let me tell you, we were deprived of any meaningful rest that night. On the 8th evening, after a few nights' quiet, we heard that wretched screaming again. Amidst the cries, a great ugly beast ambled into view. Round 8 feet high at the shoulder, wide head with long tusks like a Picardian hippopotamus, it opened its slobbering maw and let out another shriek, matching with flawless pitch the cries we had been tormented with before. It wandered on over, screaming like the devil. For 10 long minutes it wandered around the outpost, sniffing the wall and leaving little gifts in the ground. After shoving a few points on the wall, screaming as it went, the creature backed up. With a snort, the devil charged, throwing its humped shoulder against the wall. While the structure held, and God bless Jada for insisting we reinforce with extra planks, it let out one final scream before shuffling off. We never did see it again. Kagaman said he knew the beast. His people call it Bokodu. Hungry trees watch and follow. Said it was a juvenile. The notion of that creature more than doubling in size is just unnatural. Dr. Kaplan said it was probably mimicking the screams of people it had eaten, perhaps even those sacrificed by locals to stave its wretched hunger, in its own infernal way asking us to send a screaming gift of flesh and bone. Kagaman said his people do not sacrifice their own, but whatever the reason, those screams were too precise not to be heard firsthand. And it certainly felt like he was expecting from us more than just our fear. As mentioned in this passage, the animal encountered by the assembly research team was a juvenile male Bokodu, largest of the entelodonts. Entelodonts were hoofed mammals in Earth's Eocene to Miocene. They came to Kaimere in the Oligocene, already as fairly derived omnivores. Being mobile generalists, they were one of the few large mammals to have a long-term success during the Tyrant Dynasty, in some cases growing to the dimensions of Daeodon, which I am very happy to say we will get to see more of now that Forgotten Bloodlines Agate has been fully funded. Although the largest species died out in the dynastic extinction, 2 families of small generalists survived: robust temperate species and gracile and social tropical taxa with high intelligence. The robust taxa quickly dominated many mesopredator niches in the forests, competing with some of the smaller theropods stepping up to vacant niches. In the open territory, the gracile and cursorial entelodonts also got larger, but still were fairly social and increasingly intelligent. This larger brain did come at the cost of space for the temporalis muscles, so their bite is not as strong. Mimicry was a common trait in these herding animals, which they used to maintain communication and ward away predators. One species of these grew quite massive as the open terrain predator niche was vacant. Although quite slow-moving, they seem to have had a great deal of success. At the end of the Warring Clades period, around 10 million years ago, they ruled the prairie, giant cockatrices the forest, and abelisaurids took the wetlands. For several million years after, Kairul's predator guild was stable. This peace was shattered with the arrival of the robust monarch megaraptorans from Nikar. In each region, the prairie, forest, and wetland habitats, the megaraptorans usurped the dominion of the old kings. The ancestors of the Kurojaku claimed the wetlands, and a single species of megaraptoran eventually diversified into 3, one in the equatorial north, and one in each of the 2 great forests to the south. The giant cockatrices specialized in young titanosaurs and other armored game to avoid competing with the forest monarchs. The abelisaurids gravitated toward temperate wetlands, and the ancestors of the Bokodu adapted to become more omnivorous and scavenging to avoid competing with the ancestors of the Uktan, modern kings of the prairie. Bokodu can be found throughout most of Kairul. Females will take up residence in mosaic forests and primarily feed on foliage and seasonal fruit, though they will range into wetlands for higher nutrient plants and also scavenge. When the opportunity to hunt presents itself, they are quite capable of bringing down large game, but as most of their lives are spent pregnant or raising 1 or 2 young calves, they are reluctant to tackle dangerous prey. Sows are generally solitary aside from their offspring, but they will usually live close to their sisters and other female relatives, meeting up on territorial borders and cooperating sometimes when a new calf is born or during the rainy season when food is more plentiful. Sows tend to weigh between 3 and 5 tons, though 6-ton sows are not uncommon, especially after they reach menopause. These matriarchs roam about the territories of their descendants, providing food and protection where needed, as they are no longer mothers themselves. While their hide looks quite imposing, and it indeed offers a degree of protection, the primary purpose of these wrinkles is actually for thermoregulation. Increasing the surface area of the skin is critical in their northern range. Their mantle of coarse hair, which perhaps counterintuitively is more pronounced in individuals living in warmer regions, also appears to help in shedding heat. Calves are born after a pregnancy lasting nearly 3 years. During the next year or 2, they receive exclusive care from their mother as they get their feet under them, then another 3 while she is pregnant with the next calf. During this time, they have baby teeth, the first of 7 sets they will grow throughout their lives. After the next calf is born, the first will remain with their mother, but they are weaned after the growth of their juvenile teeth, and mom only offers protection. They must feed themselves. After their mother has a 3rd calf around the time that the first grows their adolescent teeth at around 8 to 10 years old, they are then on their own. Females become transient, moving around the territories of related females for a few years until they reach maturity at around 15 years of age. They will often spend time with matriarchs in the region during this time. Males, however, have much less certain path ahead. Most frequently, young boars of between 8 and 15 years will gather in small bachelor herds, usually between 3 and 5 animals. They wander about, practicing combat with other boars, fending off predators, learning efficient paths of travel, hunting any game they can catch, and learning where reliable food is. Mortality is highest for Bokodu at this stage. At being between 2 and 4 tons, they are fairly easy prey for an experienced monarch to take down. Once they reach maturity between 20 and 22 years of age, they weigh between 7 and 8 tons and strike out on their own. For the rest of their 60 to 100 years of life, boars are solitary nomads, traveling hundreds of miles in a day in search of food and mates. The largest and oldest boars, on their last set of teeth, can weigh up to 13 tons and have little to fear even from a pair of megaraptorans. Boars take the generalist diet of their female counterparts to an extreme. They will take just about any calories they can get. For a week that might eat all the fruit in one grove, hunt down an aquatic rhinoceros, spend a month gorging themselves on foliage in a nearby wetland, then another 5 days subsisting on meat and marrow from a young titan brought down by an Uktan he drove off. They are not dedicated predators, but with a bite capable of cracking a titan's leg, they can kill just about anything they can catch. Able to sprint up to 35 miles per hour and maintain a steady pace of 6 miles per hour for days at a time, large boars are daunting predators when they do set their sights on a prize. Although sows and young boars are themselves prey to Uktan, giant boars in good health have nothing to fear. Some consider them to be the top predators of Kairul, but considering the given region there are 50 to over 100 adult megaraptorans for every boar of notable size, and even fewer large enough to be immune to predation, it is hard to argue that they are truly a dominant presence, rather a rare yet formidable god of this distant realm. While sows establish a territory, regularly mingling with their female relatives, adult boars are solitary nomads. With such long strides and a highly efficient gait, they are experts at migration. It would not be unprecedented for a Bokodu born in the southern temperate forests of southwestern Kairul to wander and find his first mate in the equatorial badlands of the Kairulan northeast, over 20,000 miles from where he once called home. Although there appear to be some regional differences between population, all Bokodu across Kairul are the same species, likely due to how far and wide the boars travel. This also means they have a surprisingly healthy variation when, given their relative scarcity, less nomadic animals may well have gone extinct due to genetic isolation. Because of this, many assembly naturalists believe that the nomadic habits of the boars is likely a significant factor in their continued survival. Although most young males travel in bachelor herds, occasionally one will join an adult boar in his travels. Usually this only occurs when the two are related, such as a boar returning to a sow he mated with a decade earlier and taking his son along with him. But sometimes they are strangers, and the boar's reasoning for taking on an apprentice is unknown. Dr. Kurt Baldwin described them as a knight and squire during his initial report on the Bokodu over a century ago, and the name stuck. The knight will chase off his squire before the young boar reaches maturity so the two do not compete for mates, but being able to have such a bond is extremely beneficial to the squire. There is safety in being in the shadow of a knight. Squires tend to grow larger than their bachelor counterparts due to more reliable food, and practicing combat with an experienced knight can make them quite formidable opponents. They also tend to prefer feats of strength over direct fighting when winning over potential mates, and this restraint seems to be generally selected for by sows. Squires are themselves more likely to take on young pages once they come of age, and squires have a much higher survival rate. They do not seem to be much in it for the knight, though they do benefit from backup if injured or overwhelmed by multiple theropods, and of course there is the benefit in ensuring the survival of their own progeny, if the squire is indeed their son. Bokodu are not common animals, and any advantage in guiding young males through the most vulnerable time of their lives is highly beneficial. This rarity is largely due to their rate of reproduction, which is quite slow. Although Uktan and the forest monarchs also take 15 to 20 years to reach adulthood, they can have offspring every year instead of every 4, and several of their young are likely to reach adulthood. While Uktan and other monarchs of the genus usually only have a few young every year, if times are tough or they lose a clutch, they can and will produce more eggs the following year. If a mother Bokodu loses her calf, she has simply lost 4 years just in pregnancy in the first year of investment, and cows are sometimes hunted by monarchs, further reducing their numbers. Giant boars are known to hunt and kill megaraptorans, perhaps in a conscious effort to reduce threats, but the monarchs always bounce back in numbers, and considering every fight he engages in could result in an injury that might leave him vulnerable, it should come as no surprise that only a few boars seek out such conflicts. Those who do and excel at the task have found their way into legends and chronicles of the indigenous Kairulan peoples. Although it has not been directly accounted for by naturalists of the Great Library or Assembly, there are reports of Bokodu practicing voice and even word mimicry on the same level as their smaller cousins, the Nahashet of the known world and related species on Kairul. There are legends of witches and kings of Kairulan peoples riding on Bokodu as mounts. These are not substantiated, but considering how many people in the northern prairie bond with and ride cursorial entelodonts, the notion should not be dismissed out of hand. Although fossils of Bokodu have been found in the known world, none have been seen in modern times. The Shu have many legends of Nahashet the size of a glanos, and although many of these giant beasts in their myth are simple exaggeration, it is possible that Bokodu boar occasionally island hop across the space between Nikar and Kairul. This would not result in an established population, as males are the only ones to regularly travel, but those few Bokodu boars who do pass into the known world, there would be nothing to stand in their way. Cheers to Peter for sponsoring this episode. He's been a good friend and great help over the years in a lot of creature designs in Kaimere, including the Rukel parrot. It was fun to dive in and refine the Bokodu, which has been overdue for some time. I've got the outline of a story following a Bokodu knight and squire, which may be in my next anthology or the one after, but either way this episode was helpful in thinking through the logistics of this unusual relationship. This definitely made me excited to dive in once I'm done with the Dragon Rider story. I've got something fun planned for April Fools, and next week we will journey into the freshwater habitats on the known world and meet some of the river monsters that would make Jeremy Wade sign on to the assembly before you can say angler. Thanks again for watching. Thank you so much to my Patreon patrons who make these episodes possible, and again to Peter for sponsoring this episode and sharing in my enthusiasm for the natural world. Cheers, folks!